At 0530 hours on June 4, 1942, Lieutenant Howard Adie climbed into his PBY Catalina at Midway Island, preparing for a patrol that would change the course of the Pacific War. Adie was 24 years old, Naval Academy class of 1939, flying with Patrol Squadron 23. His aircraft, tail number 23P6, sat heavy on the water, loaded with fuel for a 700-mile search pattern. Somewhere out there in the pre-dawn darkness, the Japanese fleet was approaching. Naval intelligence suspected it. Radio intercepts suggested it, but nobody knew exactly where they were or when they would strike. The PBY Catalina was not built for combat. It was built for endurance. Twin-engine flying boat, parasol wing mounted above the fuselage, cruise speed of 115 miles per hour. Slow, unmaneuverable, lightly armed, but it could stay airborne for 24 hours, cover 2,500 miles, and see everything within 50 miles on a clear day. In the vast Pacific, where fleets could hide in millions of square miles of empty ocean, the Catalina was the Navy's solution to an impossible problem: find the enemy before the enemy found you. Adie's crew consisted of 8 men: co-pilot Ensign Robert Swan, navigator, radio man, flight engineer, and 3 gunners. They had been flying together for 4 months, running patrol after patrol from Midway, searching empty ocean, finding nothing. The routine was mind-numbing. Take off before dawn, fly straight lines across featureless water for 15 hours, return after dark, sleep, repeat. But this morning felt different. The base had been on alert for 3 days. Every available aircraft was flying. The Marines had deployed every fighter they had. The B-17 bombers were loaded and ready. Everyone knew the Japanese were coming. The question was when and from what direction. Adie took off at 0415 hours, climbed to cruise altitude, and headed northwest on bearing 315 degrees. His assigned sector covered 45 degrees of arc, extending 700 miles from Midway. He would fly out on one bearing, turn 15 degrees, fly back, turn again, systematically searching 22,000 square miles of ocean. The PBY had one advantage over every other patrol aircraft. It could fly low and slow. While land-based bombers had to maintain altitude and speed, the Catalina could drop down to 500 feet, throttle back to 90 knots, and study every wave, every shadow, every anomaly on the surface. The crew could actually see what they were looking for, not just scan radar screens or squint through bomb sites. At 0530 hours, Adie was 180 miles from Midway when his co-pilot spotted something on the horizon. Smoke. Multiple columns of black smoke rising from beyond the curve of the Earth. Ships. Many ships, making high speed. Adie turned toward the smoke and descended to 1,000 feet. As they closed the distance, the Japanese fleet materialized through the morning haze. 2 aircraft carriers, multiple battleships, cruisers, destroyers, the main striking force. Exactly what they had been searching for. The radio man immediately transmitted the contact report. 2 carriers and main body bearing 320 degrees, distance 180 miles, course 135 degrees, speed 25 knots. That message, sent at 0534 hours, initiated the Battle of Midway. Admiral Fletcher received it aboard Yorktown at 0603. Admiral Spruance received it aboard Enterprise minutes later. Every American commander in the Pacific got the same information simultaneously. The Japanese fleet was located. The ambush could begin. But Adie's job was not finished. He needed to maintain contact, provide updates, track the enemy's course and speed. The problem was that Japanese Zero fighters were already launching from the carriers below. Adie could see them climbing toward his altitude. A PBY had no chance against a Zero. No speed to run, no maneuverability to fight, no armor to survive. Adie climbed into the clouds at 4,000 feet and began a game of cat and mouse that would last 3 hours. He would duck into cloud cover, emerge miles away, take a quick look at the fleet, transmit an update, then disappear again before the Zeros could intercept. The Japanese fighters searched frantically but could not find him in the overcast. The slow, lumbering PBY used weather and patience to stay alive while maintaining contact with the most powerful fleet in the Japanese Navy. At 0830 hours, after 3 hours of continuous tracking, Addy was relieved by another PBY and turned for home. He landed at Midway at 1000 hours, refueled, and took off again at 1300 hours for another patrol. The battle was raging. American carrier planes were striking the Japanese fleet based on his contact report. The entire engagement pivoted on that first sighting at 0530 hours. The Battle of Midway was won by many factors: code breaking, tactical decisions, individual heroism, and luck. But without Addy's PBY finding the Japanese fleet, none of it would have mattered. The slow, ungainly flying boat had done what no other aircraft could do. It had searched vast areas of ocean, found the needle in the haystack, and lived to report it. This was the PBY's role throughout the war. Not glamorous, not exciting most of the time, but absolutely essential. The Navy had 93 patrol squadrons operating Catalinas by 1943. Over 3,000 PBYs were built. They flew from Alaska to Australia, from Pearl Harbor to the Persian Gulf, searching, watching, reporting. The aircraft itself was remarkable for 1935 design standards. Consolidated Aircraft Corporation won the Navy contract with a flying boat that could do something no previous patrol plane could accomplish. It could fly 2,500 miles without refueling, stay aloft for over 20 hours, carry a crew of up to 10 men, and operate from water without requiring airfields. The key to this endurance was efficiency, not speed. The PBY cruised at 115 miles per hour, barely faster than modern highway traffic. But at that speed, its two Pratt & Whitney radial engines could run for an entire day on 1,800 gallons of fuel. The aircraft was basically a flying fuel tank with wings. The hull contained integral fuel cells. Additional tanks filled the wing sections. Every available space that was not needed for crew or equipment held fuel. This range came with trade-offs. The PBY was slow. Fighters could catch it easily. It was unmaneuverable. A turning radius was measured in miles, not feet. It was lightly armed. Early versions had 330 caliber machine guns. Later versions added 50 caliber guns, but it was still gunned for air combat. The joke among PBY crews was that their aircraft was a clay pigeon with engines. But the Navy did not need the PBY to fight. They needed it to see. In the Pacific War, information was often more valuable than firepower. Knowing where the enemy was, where they were going, what forces they had, this intelligence shaped every strategic decision. The PBY provided that intelligence day after day, mission after mission, in conditions that would ground other aircraft. The crew accommodations reflected the marathon missions these aircraft flew. Behind the flight deck, the PBY had a compartment with bunks where off-duty crew could rest. There was a small galley with a hot plate for heating coffee and canned food. The aircraft had a chemical toilet, rare for military aircraft of that era. These were not luxuries. They were necessities for missions that routinely lasted 18 to 24 hours. The galley was particularly basic. 1 hot plate, 2 stainless steel, water beakers, minimal storage space. Crews brought canned food aboard for long patrols. Vienna sausages were standard, along with crackers, canned fruit, and coffee, lots of coffee. On a 20-hour mission, coffee was what kept crews functional. The hot plate could heat water for coffee or warm up canned goods, but that was the extent of its capability. There was no refrigeration, no cooking equipment beyond that single hot plate. Veterans recalled that by hour 15 of a patrol, everyone was exhausted, cold or hot depending on the climate, and sick of Vienna sausages. The cabin was not heated until late in the war, making North Atlantic patrols particularly miserable. In the South Pacific, the greenhouse effect of the large windows made the cabin unbearably hot. Either way, comfort was not part of the equation. But crews adapted. They developed routines for long missions. 3 pilots would rotate flying duties. Other crew members would rotate through positions to stay alert. The bunks allowed some rest, though sleeping was difficult with engine noise and turbulence. The ability to make hot coffee at altitude was a morale boost that should not be underestimated. On a 20-hour mission, small comforts mattered enormously. The PBY's most important capability was its versatility. It could take off from water, eliminating the need for airfields. Island bases across the Pacific needed only a protected lagoon or harbor to operate PBYs. This allowed the Navy to establish patrol bases on remote atolls that could never support traditional aircraft. Places like Canton Island, Palmyra, and dozens of other specks of land became unsinkable aircraft carriers for PBY operations. The aircraft could also be modified for different missions. The standard PBY-5 was a pure flying boat, taking off and landing only on water. The PBY-5A added retractable landing gear, making it amphibious. It could operate from water or land, doubling its tactical flexibility. This proved crucial in places like the Aleutians, where weather could close water operations but leave runways usable, or vice versa. By late 1942, the Navy realized the PBY could do more than just patrol. Its long range and ability to operate at night made it ideal for a mission nobody had anticipated: attacking Japanese shipping in darkness. The Black Cat squadrons were born from necessity and innovation. The Japanese owned the daylight hours in many areas. Their fighters controlled the sky, their anti-aircraft guns protected their ships. But at night, the advantage shifted. Japanese fighters could not operate effectively in darkness. Their ships were vulnerable. The problem was finding and attacking them without radar or sophisticated navigation aids. Lieutenant Commander Clarence Taff pioneered the tactics that would define Black Cat operations. His squadron, VP-12, arrived at Henderson Field on Guadalcanal in December 1942. The Marines held the airfield, but Japanese ships still ran supplies to their forces every night. The Tokyo Express, Americans called it. Fast destroyers racing down from Rabaul, delivering troops and supplies, bombarding Marine positions, then racing back before dawn. Taff realized the PBY could intercept these ships if they flew at night. But everything about the aircraft would have to change. First, the paint. Standard PBYs were painted blue-grey on top, white on bottom. Fine for daytime patrol, useless for night operations. Taff had his aircraft painted matte black, including the national insignia. The only markings were small red serial numbers. In darkness, the aircraft became invisible. Next, the tactics. Daytime patrol was about systematic coverage, flying precise patterns at consistent altitudes. Night attack was about unpredictability. Black Cats would take off at dusk, fly to areas where Japanese ships were expected, then hunt. They flew low, sometimes just 50 feet above the water. They used island silhouettes to mask their approach. They attacked from unexpected angles, dropped their ordnance, then disappeared into darkness before the Japanese could respond. The weapons changed too. Standard PBYs carried depth charges for submarine patrol or bombs for ground attack. Black Cats carried everything: bombs, depth charges, torpedoes when available, even hand grenades the crew would throw out the waste blisters. One Black Cat crew famously attacked a Japanese submarine with Molotov cocktails made from beer bottles filled with aviation fuel. The psychological impact was significant. Japanese sailors had felt safe moving at night. Suddenly, black-painted flying boats appeared from nowhere, attacked, and vanished. The Japanese called them Black Cats independently, not knowing that was what Americans called them too. The name reflected the aircraft's ability to appear suddenly, strike, and disappear, like a cat hunting in darkness. Squadron VP-54, known as Black Cat Squadron, recorded one of the most successful night attacks on February 21, 1943. Lieutenant William Goff and his crew spotted a Japanese destroyer near Kolombangara Island. They approached at 50 feet altitude, using the dark mass of the island to mask their approach. At 800 yards, Goff climbed to attack altitude and released two 500-pound bombs, both hit. The destroyer exploded and sank in minutes, but the cost was high. Flying at night at low altitude over water in a slow, large aircraft was dangerous even without enemy action. Spatial disorientation, mechanical failures, and navigation errors killed crews regularly. Of the 7 original Black Cat PBYs that deployed to Guadalcanal, 4 were lost within 2 months. Not all to enemy action. Night operations in marginal weather with no electronic aids was barely controlled chaos. The Black Cats expanded throughout 1943. Squadrons deployed to the Solomons, New Guinea, the Aleutians, and eventually the Philippines. Each squadron developed its own tactics based on local conditions. In the Aleutians, Black Cats hunted Japanese submarines in perpetual darkness and fog. In the Philippines, they laid mines in Japanese harbors. In the Solomons, they interdicted barge traffic between islands. The Black Cats faced constant danger. On one mission in September 1943, a PBY from VP-54 was caught by Japanese searchlights during an attack run. The pilot dove to wave height, engines at full power, while anti-aircraft fire erupted around them. They escaped by flying directly between 2 Japanese destroyers, so low that the ships could not depress their guns enough to hit them. The destroyers ended up firing at each other in the confusion. The psychological warfare aspect of Black Cat operations proved highly effective. Japanese sailors reported that the black-painted aircraft were nearly invisible until they attacked. The distinctive sound of the PBY's engines became a source of dread. Japanese naval officers complained that the night attacks were disrupting supply operations and damaging morale. Ships had to maintain blackout conditions and post extra lookouts, reducing their operational efficiency. But the PBY's greatest contribution was not combat, it was rescue. By mid-1943, hundreds of American aircraft were operating over vast stretches of ocean. When they went down, their crews faced death from exposure, sharks, or drowning unless someone found them quickly. The PBY became the Navy's primary rescue aircraft, saving thousands of lives throughout the war. The most famous rescue occurred on April 18, 1943. Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, America's top ace from World War I, was on an inspection tour when his B-17 went down in the Pacific. Rickenbacker and 7 crew members survived in life rafts for 24 days. They were finally spotted by Lieutenant William Eady flying a PBY from Squadron VP-51. Eady landed in 8-foot swells, a dangerous maneuver that could easily capsize the aircraft. He successfully rescued all survivors. But most rescues were not famous. They were routine operations that meant everything to the men pulled from the water. Lieutenant Nathan Gordon of Squadron VP-34 received the Medal of Honor for rescuing 15 sailors on February 15, 1944. Japanese fighters had shot down multiple American aircraft near Kavieng. Gordon landed his PBY in the harbor under enemy fire, taxied to each life raft, and pulled survivors aboard. He made 3 separate landings, each time under fire, until he had rescued everyone he could find. The PBY could land in conditions that would destroy other aircraft. Its boat hull was designed to handle rough water. Experienced pilots could land in 10-foot swells, though it required exceptional skill. The aircraft would slam into waves with tremendous force. Crews described it like riding a bucking bronco made of aluminum. But the hull held, and men lived because of it. By 1944, the Navy had established a systematic rescue operation called Dumbo missions, named after the Disney elephant. PBYs would orbit near strike operations, ready to rescue downed airmen. Fighter pilots knew that if they went down, a Dumbo would come for them. This knowledge made them more aggressive, more willing to press attacks, knowing rescue was possible. The numbers tell the story. PBYs rescued over 2,000 airmen during the war. Entire bomber crews, fighter pilots, sailors from sunken ships. Each rescue required the PBY crew to risk their own lives, landing in hostile waters, often under enemy fire, always with the chance that weather or mechanical failure could destroy their aircraft during the rescue attempt. The Catalina also pioneered long-range medical evacuation. The aircraft's range and ability to land on water made it ideal for evacuating wounded from remote locations. PBYs fitted with stretchers could carry 8 wounded men. Navy corpsmen flew on these missions, providing medical care during the long flights back to base hospitals. For wounded men on isolated islands or damaged ships, the PBY was often the difference between life and death. One of the most remarkable medical evacuations occurred in January 1944. A PBY from Squadron VP 43 landed at a remote coastwatcher station in the Solomon Islands to evacuate a critically wounded Marine. The landing area was a river mouth barely wider than the aircraft's wingspan. The pilot had to fly up the river at treetop height, land in a space with no room for error, then take off down the same narrow channel. The Marine survived because the PBY crew was willing to attempt what seemed impossible. The PBY's contribution to intelligence gathering went beyond simple reconnaissance. By 1943, modified Catalinas carried early radar systems, allowing them to detect ships and aircraft at night or in bad weather. These radar-equipped PBYs could track enemy movements in conditions where visual observation was impossible. They became the Navy's first airborne early warning aircraft, a concept that would become crucial in later conflicts. Squadron VP 63 operated radar-equipped PBYs from Alaska, tracking Japanese submarines and ships in the perpetual fog of the Aleutians. On May 11, 1943, they guided the Navy task force that retook Attu Island by providing radar navigation through fog so thick that ships could not see each other. Without the PBY's radar guidance, the invasion fleet would have been scattered and vulnerable. The Catalina served with multiple Allied nations. The British Royal Air Force operated over 600 Catalinas, using them for anti-submarine patrol in the Atlantic. The Royal Canadian Air Force flew Catalinas from both coasts, protecting convoys and searching for German U-boats. The Soviet Navy received 189 Catalinas through Lend-Lease, using them in the Arctic and Pacific. The Royal Australian Air Force used Catalinas to maintain communication with coast watchers scattered across the Pacific Islands. These flights, called milk runs, delivered supplies and evacuated personnel from behind Japanese lines. Flying alone, unarmed except for defensive guns, landing in waters controlled by the enemy, these missions required exceptional courage. Australian Flight Lieutenant Garth Hemsworth flew 112 milk runs, more than any other pilot. He was shot down 3 times but survived the war. The PBY even served as a commercial airliner during the war. Pan American Airways operated Catalinas on routes across the Pacific and Atlantic when civilian airliners were requisitioned for military use. These flights carried priority passengers, mail, and critical supplies. The 18-hour flight from San Francisco to Honolulu in a Catalina was not comfortable, but it maintained vital civilian connections when no other aircraft could make the journey. Production of the Catalina continued throughout the war. Consolidated built 2,400 PBYs at their San Diego plant. Canadian Vickers built 369. Boeing Canada built 362. The Soviet Union built 27 under license. Naval Aircraft Factory in Philadelphia built 156. By the time production ended in 1945, over 3,000 Catalinas had been built, making it the most produced flying boat in history. The final combat missions flown by US Navy PBYs occurred on August 14, 1945. Multiple PBYs from various squadrons were on patrol near Japan when they received word that Japan had agreed to surrender. They completed their patrols, returning to bases at Okinawa and elsewhere at dawn on August 15th, logging the last operational flights of PBYs in World War II. The war that began for many PBY crews at Pearl Harbor had finally ended. After the war, many PBYs continued flying. Smaller nations bought surplus Catalinas for their air forces. Civilian operators used them for passenger service to remote locations. Some became firefighting aircraft, scooping water from lakes to drop on forest fires. A few still fly today. Over 80 years after the first Catalina took flight, testament to the robust design that made them legendary. The PBY Catalina was never the fastest, most maneuverable, or most heavily armed aircraft of World War II. But it may have been the most important. It found enemy fleets when no other aircraft could. It rescued thousands of men from certain death. It flew missions that lasted longer than a day, in weather that grounded other aircraft, from bases that were nothing more than protected water. The men who flew Catalinas rarely received the recognition given to fighter pilots or bomber crews. Their missions were often boring, flying straight lines over empty ocean for 20 hours. But when they found the enemy fleet that everyone was searching for, when they landed in rough seas to pull survivors from the water, when they appeared out of the night to attack enemy ships, they proved that victory in war often comes from the slow, steady, unglamorous work that keeps operations running day after day. Lieutenant Howard Adey, who found the Japanese fleet at Midway, survived the war and retired from the Navy as a captain. He rarely talked about that morning in June 1942, when his sighting changed history. When asked about it years later, he said he was just doing his job, flying patrol, searching for the enemy, reporting what he found. That was what PBY crews did. Nothing special, he said, just their job. But that job, multiplied by thousands of crews flying millions of miles over empty ocean, helped win the Pacific War. The Catalina proved that in modern warfare, the ability to see and report is often more important than the ability to destroy. Information wins wars. The slow, reliable PBY provided that information when no other aircraft could. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. It helps more people discover these important pieces of history. Subscribe to stay connected with stories of the aircraft and crews that shaped the Second World War, and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Our community spans the globe, united by interest in the real stories of courage and innovation from history's greatest conflict. Thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering those who served.